My daughter stole every cent from our accounts and ran away with a criminal, leaving me empty-handed after 42 years of work. I was boiling with rage, but my 15-year-old grandson just smiled. "Grandpa, don't worry. I've taken care of everything." A few days later, she called, screaming and raging. "You won't believe what my clever grandson did." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I inserted my card into the ATM slot like I had done thousands of times before. The display lit up, prompting me for my PIN. Those 4 numbers I'd committed to memory 2 decades earlier flowed from my fingers automatically. Insufficient funds. My fingers halted on the buttons. The display glared at me with those 2 unbelievable words. I removed the card and inspected it, looking for any damage on the magnetic strip. Perhaps the device was faulty. It must be. I pushed it back in. Identical PIN, identical request for the amount to withdraw, identical devastating reply. "This isn't possible." The phrase slipped out before I could hold it back. An older lady waiting behind me fidgeted restlessly, her keys clinking against her handbag. I rummaged through my wallet once more, tallying the 20s I'd pulled out the previous week. $40 remaining from the food shopping. The savings account. That should function. Separate card, same ATM, same PIN. My hands shook as I keyed in the digits. Insufficient funds. Perspiration formed on my brow even with the chilly April wind. I'd verified the balance only last week. $12,147. My complete reserve built from 42 years on the assembly line at Ford. Each extra hour, each missed meal, each penny stashed carefully for my golden years. The lady coughed pointedly behind me. "Apologies," I muttered, collecting my cards. The ATM ejected a slip. "Account balance 000. Final activity at 9:23 a.m. today." My knees wobbled as I headed for the bank doors. The glass panels mirrored an elderly gentleman in worn denim and a plaid top. Someone appearing bewildered and diminished. Within, the usual aroma of rug shampoo and brewed coffee greeted me. Janet Morrison was stationed at the teller station, the same lady who'd managed my deposits for 15 years. "Good afternoon, Mr. Williamson," she greeted with her typical grin. "What can I do for you?" "Janet, there's an issue with my accounts." I set both cards on the ledge. "The ATM claims I'm broke, but that can't be accurate." Her fingers flew over the keys. Her smile vanished. "Let me access your transaction log." Additional keystrokes. A hesitation. "Mr. Williamson, there's a withdrawal at 9:23 a.m. today for the entire amount of $12,147. The space spun a bit. "That's impossible. I was asleep at home around 9:30. The record indicates it was done by Vera Hayes. She's noted as a co-owner on the account." Janet's tone softened. "She took out everything, sir, from both checking and savings." Vera. My daughter's name struck me like a punch, but she couldn't have. It has to be an error. Janet rotated her screen my way. There it was, clear as day. Vera Hayes. Complete withdrawal. Every last dollar I'd saved vanished. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Williamson. It looks valid." She had the right permissions. I gazed at the display until the figures smeared. Co-owner. I'd included her 3 years back during her divorce, in case of an emergency with me, in case she required assistance for young Micah. My fingers trembled as I picked up the cards from the counter. "Thanks, Janet. Mr. Williamson, are you okay? Should I contact someone for you?" I shook my head and staggered toward the exit on shaky limbs. Outside, the midday sunlight felt overly harsh. My aged Ford truck waited in the lot where I'd parked it, but the rest of reality had altered. The entire universe had realigned while I lingered at that ATM. I fished my phone from my coat pocket and navigated to Vera's contact. My finger paused over the dial icon. There must be a reason. Some crisis involving Micah, some mix-up. My own child wouldn't rob me, would she? The line rang 5 times before switching to voicemail. Her tone was upbeat and remote. "Hello, this is Vera. Leave a note and I'll return your call." I disconnected and redialed right away. 5 rings, voicemail. My grip tightened on the wheel as I sat in the rear lot. Vehicles zipped along Main Street. Ordinary folks carrying on ordinary existences while mine fell apart. I attempted her number a 3rd time. Ring, ring, ring. "Answer, Vera, please." 4th try. 5th. On the 6th, she picked up. "Dad, I know the reason for your call." Her voice was altered, icy, ready. No shock, no worry, just acceptance. "Vera, dear, what occurred with the funds? Janet at the bank mentioned you pulled it all out this morning, but that has to be wrong. Quiet lingered between us. I could detect traffic sounds behind her. The drone of interstate driving. It's precisely correct. Each syllable fell like a rock. I withdrew everything. Titus and I are beginning anew in a different place. The device slipped in my damp hand. But darling, that's all I possess. My full retirement fund. How will I manage? You'll sort it out. You always manage. Vera, please. If you're facing trouble, we can discuss it. Return home. Bring Micah. We'll resolve it as a family. A bitter chuckle echoed through the phone. Nothing to resolve, Dad. I deserve this cash more than you. I've spent my life looking after others. Now it's my moment. What about Micah? What about his education? His buddies? He can't simply vanish. Micah's here with me. He'll adapt. Children bounce back. My grandson, kind and smart Micah, with his chess competitions and science exhibits ripped from all he knew. Vera, you can't. That child requires consistency. He needs his house, his classes. What he requires is a mom who's content for a change. Someone not trapped in this nowhere town, slaving at nowhere jobs, barely getting by while others enjoy genuine existences. I provided all I could. When you split from Jimmy, who paid for the attorney? When rent was short, who stepped in? When Micah needed supplies for school, fresh outfits, gifts for birthdays, who supplied them? And I'm thankful. This is my way of repaying you by claiming what I need for a superior life. The reasoning didn't add up. I rubbed my temple with my spare hand, striving to comprehend. Darling, please return. We can sort this. If you need funds for something particular, we can set it up. Nothing to set up. Titus and I are 3 states distant already. Don't search for us. The connection cut off. I rang back at once, directly to voicemail. Again, identical outcome. The third effort yielded a notice. The number you've reached is no longer active. She'd cut me off. I remained in the truck, fixated on the phone display. My daughter had just taken my life savings and vanished with my grandson. No alert, no talk, no opportunity to bid farewell to the boy I'd helped nurture for 15 years. The lot appeared to whirl around me. I clutched the door handle, battling nausea. 42 years of prudent saving, erased in one morning transfer. The girl I'd cradled as an infant, instructed to pedal a bike, escorted down the aisle at her nuptials, had just ruined me without a second thought. I twisted the key in the ignition with quivering fingers. The vintage Ford's motor sputtered awake, dependable and familiar. At least one thing still operated as expected. Easing onto Main Street, I cruised leisurely past the tool shop, the eatery, the modest stores that had grounded my existence for years. All appeared unchanged, yet I felt like an outsider in my hometown. The person who'd arrived at the bank an hour prior was gone. I required space to reflect before heading home. Space to absorb what had transpired. Space to plan survival with just $40. I navigated the neighborhood roads without deliberate path, allowing habit to steer me by known sights. The primary school, where I'd collected Vera daily for 6 years. Mrs. Patterson's room, 3rd grade, where my young girl had triumphed in the spelling contest. I'd been so elated perched in those small plastic seats at the prize event. The frozen treat parlor on Elm Street, where we'd marked her 10th birthday. Just us two, as her mom had begun distancing herself by then. Vera had chosen a banana split larger than her face and proclaimed it the greatest birthday ever. Daddy. My throat constricted as I veered into Riverside Park, the identical park where life had once been straightforward, where good parenting involved swing pushes and firefly chases, not handling shared accounts and treachery. I parked by the pond and strolled to our familiar bench, the one overlooking the duck groups that assembled each spring. Vera used to carry old bread in a sack, meticulously ripping it into ideal bits. Not too large, Daddy, the tiny ducks can't handle big pieces. She'd been 3 or 4, balancing on her toes to toss over the barrier. Her little hand had slid into mine with total faith. I love you more than anybody, Daddy. Those phrases resonated over 28 years as I sat solitary on the weathered wood bench. The ducks glided near the bank, but no young girl was beside me now. No attentive dad describing male and female ducks. I recalled teaching her bike riding right in this park. She'd been 7, resolute yet scared, demanding I grip the seat as she pedaled. Round and round the trail we'd circled, her stabilizers off that morning despite her mother's objections. Don't release, Daddy, swear you won't release. But I did release eventually. Observed her teeter and steady herself and pedal off with sheer delight on her face. She'd looped back, panting with thrill. Did you watch me, Daddy? Did you see me bike all alone? When had that delighted child turned into the frosty voice on the call? When had I loved you more than anybody, Daddy? Shifted to. I took it all. High school commencement resurfaced in pieces. Vera in her blue robe and cap, delivering the valedictorian address to a gymnasium of beaming parents. I'd occupied the front row, glowing as she discussed aspirations and opportunities and the bright path ahead. My dad showed me that diligence and commitment can surmount any hurdle, she'd declared that evening. The whole crowd had pivoted to grin at me, the lone parent who'd nurtured such a successful daughter. What hurdles was she surmounting now by pilfering my nest egg? Her wedding day emerged next, unwelcome and vivid. The father-daughter waltz at the VFW venue, her ivory gown twirling as I led her across the compact dance area. Paul had seemed like a solid guy then, prior to the alcohol, before the disputes Micah overheard through flimsy walls. "Thanks for always standing by me, Dad," she'd murmured in my ear that night. "I wouldn't have made it without you." I'd embraced her tightly and vowed I'd always stand by her, through marital woes and financial strains and rearing a grandson who craved steadiness. Through it all until this morning, when always standing by meant having my devotion repaid with utter monetary ruin. The spring air bore the fragrance of fresh turf and potential, but all I sensed was the burden of recollection clashing with current truth. Every concession I'd made, every additional shift I'd taken, every frugal dollar I'd hoarded, all validated by affection. For a daughter who'd just demonstrated that affection meant zilch to her, where had that young girl vanished? The one who'd grasped my hand and called me the finest daddy ever. When had she mastered deceiving with such skilled nonchalance? To scheme betrayal while facing me and requesting rent aid? I brushed my eyes with my hands back and rose from the bench. The ducks persisted in their timeless gliding, untroubled by human sorrow. Some element stayed steady. At least one thing still held logic. Heading back to the truck, I glimpsed myself in the side mirror. Identical plaid shirt, identical tired features, but something core had changed. The man gazing back was discovering that affection could be turned into a weapon by those who counted most. I drove leisurely homeward, fearing what lay ahead. Micah's bag would still dangle by the entry from the day before, his chessboard arrayed on the kitchen surface where we'd tackled a tough finale. All the traces of the existence I'd believed was solid and purposeful. My key paused at the front lock. How do you step into your own residence when all you trusted about your kin has been demolished? How do you confront a grandson who doesn't realize his mom has forsaken him? The key rotated and I entered what was left of my routine life. Inside, the home seemed precisely alike and entirely transformed. I draped my coat on the wooden hook by the door, the same hook I'd utilized for 23 years. The living area extended ahead, packed with furnishings that had seen decades of family instances, now abruptly empty with fresh significance. Family snapshots adorned the mantel like proof in a case I was only starting to grasp. I approached them gradually, pulled by faces beaming from joyful eras. The biggest frame contained Vera's wedding image from 13 years past, her glowing in white lace, me in my soul-fine suit, both of us trusting in destinies that would never materialize. I raised the frame with unsteady hands. Paul Hayes had appeared such a prize then. University graduate, stable position at the insurance firm, courteous and deferential in our initial encounter. I'd escorted my daughter down the church aisle at St. Matthew's, proud to entrust her to a man who swore to cherish and safeguard her. 3 years. That's the duration their union endured before fissures emerged. I sank into my battered leather recliner, the one ideally placed for viewing TV and monitoring the entrance. The wedding picture stayed weighty in my grasp as remembrances surged back with stark sharpness. The initial hint was understated. Paul's remarks on Vera's meals during Sunday suppers. "Sweetie, the chicken's somewhat overdone. Perhaps next time," you might always said with a grin, always trailed by chuckles. But I'd noticed how my daughter's expression stiffened with each mild critique. Then arrived the monetary dominance. Vera had to seek approval for each buy, defend every store bill, account for every cent expended. I'd observed my assured valedictorian daughter slowly diminish into someone who said sorry for purchasing Micah new footwear when his previous ones wore out. But the morning that altered all was etched in my mind with flawless detail. October 15th, 2022, a Tuesday. I'd been scanning the paper over coffee when the doorbell chimed at 7:30 a.m. Vera appeared on my stoop in the prior day's attire, her left eye puffed closed and bruised. 3-year-old Micah gripping her leg with the fearful quiet kids assume when their realm becomes perilous. "Dad?" Paul struck me again. "Please, can Micah and I stay with you again?" The term had cut through me like a knife. How many agains had occurred that I'd been unaware of? Of course, darling, you're always welcome here. I'd stated it without pause, without inquiries, without any stipulations or demands. Just opened my arms, my house, and my heart to protect them from Paul's violent tempest. That's what I did always. Each time Vera needed saving, I saved her. Each time she needed cash, I supplied it. Each time she erred, I corrected it. Each time she sought aid, I agreed. When Paul emptied their shared checking before she could divorce, I retained the attorney. When she couldn't cover initial rent on her place, I paid it. When Micah required school gear and athletic items and birthday celebrations, I furnished all without grumbling. I cherished being essential, cherished being the dependable dad who could fix any issue, handle any emergency, fill any gap. Being Vera's secure refuge gave my later years direction and value. But amid all that boundless generosity, I'd shown her that taking from me had no repercussions, that my assets were hers by entitlement, not grace, that my affection meant she never needed to own her decisions. I examined the wedding photo, analyzing Paul's assured grin. He'd been a taker as well in his manner. The distinction was his taking involved brutality and intimidation, while mine involved embraces and comfort, but both had instructed Vera that she didn't need to answer for her deeds. Video game tunes floated from above. Micah in his space, oblivious that his mom had swiped his grandpa's whole life savings and fled, oblivious that the base of his safe, steady world had just crumbled. I replaced the wedding photo on the mantel and selected the adjacent frame. Christmas dawn, 2023. Vera, Micah, and me by the tree, encircled by gifts I'd purchased and funded. All of us grinning. All of us content. None aware that in 4 months all would collapse. When had I love you, Dad, evolved into I deserve this cash more than you? When had my daughter discovered that affection was exploitable rather than treasured? The response weighed in my chest like a boulder I'd instilled it. Every rescue payment, every absolute yes had been a tutorial in privilege. Every time I'd eased her errors, I'd blocked her from grasping that choices bear outcomes. I'd facilitated her, forged the beast that had just obliterated me. Steps shifted overhead. Micah rising from his gaming seat. Soon he'd descend for supper, anticipating the standard Tuesday night pattern we'd upheld for 3 years. Studies at the kitchen surface while I prepared food. Chess matches post-meal TV prior to sleep. How do you inform a 15-year-old lad that his mom has deserted him? That the woman meant to shield him had picked a felon over her child's steadiness and safety? I rose from the chair, aware I couldn't delay this talk much further. Micah merited the facts, even if those facts would demolish his world as thoroughly as mine had been demolished. The home felt tinier abruptly, as if the walls closed in. Every known item appeared to taunt me with echoes of the existence I'd deemed authentic. The existence where good fatherhood ensured all would end well. I proceeded to the kitchen, craving motion, craving some deed to offset the heaviness of insight pressing on my shoulders like iron. The kitchen embraced me with accustomed coziness. Weathered wood counters that had supported decades of family dinners. The ancient gas range that still needed a match to ignite. The coffee brewer that bubbled awake each dawn at 6 a.m. precisely. I craved the solace of habit, the stability of basic chores that retained meaning when nothing else did. I retrieved the coffee beans from the freezer and portioned them into the mill. The harsh grind noise filled the quiet, overpowering the game sounds from upstairs for 30 welcome seconds. Water from the faucet, filter set, grounds portioned with the accuracy of 20 years of Dawn custom. The kitchen table caught my eye as the coffee started percolating. 4 seats around marred oak, each bearing recollections. Micah's position near the window for homework. My spot at the end, facing the range. Vera's chair opposite me where she'd perched just 4 months back, presenting the man who'd ruin our kin. Dad, I'd like you to meet Titus. He's truly important to me. January 15th, a frigid Sunday night. I'd been preparing pot roast, infusing the home with the aroma of hearty fare. When Vera introduced her new partner for the first time, Titus had entered my kitchen in a black leather coat despite the chill, biker boots that marked my spotless floor, and a grin that never fully touched his gaze. Ink designs snaked up his neck in shadowy motifs hinting at jail stints and poor choices. Fine home you have, Mr. Williamson. His tone held a slickness that instantly alarmed me. Solid locks, peaceful area, really cozy arrangement you all share. I'd clasped his extended hand, sensing rough skin from manual labor, observing how his eyes inventoried every aspect of my residence, the pricey TV in the den, The family pictures displaying 3 generations of reliability, the indicators of economic security I'd never considered concealing. Vera had radiated joy, clinging to his arm like an adolescent with her initial infatuation. Titus has faced some tough times, Dad, but he's genuinely reformed his ways, right, love? Definitely, darling. History is history. I'm focused on tomorrow now. During the meal, his inquiries were relaxed yet targeted. How many years at Ford? What sort of retirement do factory folks receive? Did I hold the deed free and clear? Was Vera on any of my financial records? I'd responded courteously while my gut blared alerts. Something deeply amiss with this fellow. The manner he placed a possessive hand on my daughter's shoulder. The way he smirked when probing my money matters. The way he appraised our home as if estimating its value. But Vera was happy. Happier than I'd seen her since before Paul's abuse started. She laughed at Titus's stories, defended his rough edges, explained away his crude comments as honesty rather than disrespect. After they'd left that night, I'd stood in this same spot by the coffee maker, washing dishes and trying to convince myself that my concerns were just overprotective fatherhood. Maybe Titus deserved a second chance. Maybe his criminal past, because it was obvious he had one, was truly behind him. The next morning, my neighbor Tom Rodriguez had stopped by with his usual Tuesday coffee visit. "Interesting company you had last night," Tom had said, settling into the chair where Titus had sat. "Recognized that motorcycle from the department database." Tom had been a police officer for 15 years, the kind of cop who knew every troublemaker in 3 counties. His weathered face carried the weight of too many domestic violence calls and robbery investigations. Ran his plates after he left. Guy named Titus Morrison. Record longer than my arm. Robbery, fraud, assault charges. Real piece of work. The coffee cup had frozen halfway to my lips. How bad? Bad enough. 3 convenience store robberies in Michigan. Credit card fraud scheme that built elderly folks out of their savings. Beat a man unconscious in a bar fight 2 years ago. Guy's a predator. Rufus targets vulnerable women, especially ones with resources. I'd set down my cup with trembling hands. What should I do? Keep that guy away from your family. Change any passwords he might have seen. Maybe move some money to accounts Vera doesn't know about. This isn't the kind of man who changes no matter what he's telling your daughter. But I hadn't done any of those things. Instead, I'd convinced myself that Tom was being overly suspicious. That Vera deserved happiness after Paul's abuse. That interfering in her relationship would push her away, like I'd pushed away 2 previous boyfriends with my protective instincts. I'd watched, waited, hoped that my daughter's judgment would improve with time. Hoped that Titus would prove my concerns wrong. Hoped that love would be enough to keep our family safe. 3 months of hoping while Titus moved into our home, learned our routines, gained access to our information. 3 months of watching him charm Vera while my gut screamed that we were being hunted. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me back to the present. I poured a cup and sat down in my usual spot, staring at the empty chair where Titus had smiled and planned our destruction. I'd had all the information I needed. A police officer's warning, documented evidence of criminal behavior. My own instincts telling me this man was dangerous, and I'd done nothing. Fear had paralyzed me. Fear of losing Vera's love. Fear of being seen as controlling like Paul had been. Fear that standing up for my family would somehow make me the villain. Now we'd lost everything because I'd been too afraid of conflict to protect what mattered most. Upstairs, Micah's game sounds paused. Footsteps crossed the floor above my head. The bathroom break that meant homework time was approaching. In 15 minutes, my grandson would come downstairs expecting dinner, and normally, time was running out. The conversation I'd been dreading couldn't be postponed any longer. I rinsed my coffee cup in the sink, watching Thelas drops disappear down the drain. Everything was disappearing. Money, family, the illusion that being a good man was enough to keep the people you love safe. But Micah remained. My grandson, who trusted me to protect him, still needed to know the truth about what his mother had done. I walked back toward the living room, preparing myself for the hardest conversation of my life. The living room felt different as I entered it again, charged with the weight of approaching revelation. 5:45 on the wall clock, 15 minutes until Micah's usual homework time, 30 minutes until our normal dinner routine that would never be normal again. I paced between the couch and the coffee table, practicing words that wouldn't come. How do you explain betrayal to a child who still believes in the goodness of family? How do you shatter innocence without destroying hope? Son, your mother took our money and ran away. Too harsh, too sudden. Micah, we need to talk about some changes. Too vague. Too frightening in its uncertainty. Your mother has made some choices that affect our family. Still not right. Nothing felt right. Upstairs, the video game music continued its electronic melody. Some superhero adventure where good always triumphed over evil, where justice prevailed and heroes saved the day. The irony cut deep. My grandson was playing at being a hero while the real villains had already escaped with their spoils. I settled onto the couch, then stood up again, sat in my armchair, then moved back to the couch. The house felt too small for the conversation we needed to have, yet too large for the emptiness that conversation would create. Through the ceiling, I could hear Micah's routine unfolding with predictable precision, the squeak of his desk chair as he pushed back from the computer, footsteps to the bathroom, the flush of the toilet, running water at the sink, the familiar sounds of a 15-year-old preparing to transition from play to work. My mind raced through different approaches. Should I ease into the topic with gentle questions about his mother? Start with reassurances about his security and future? Lead with the practical implications before revealing the emotional betrayal? The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking time that felt both too fast and too slow. Each minute brought us closer to the moment when Micah's world would change forever. Each second gave me more time to doubt every word I'd planned to say. At 5:50, his gaming chair creaked again, the pause of a save game in progress. Soon he'd shut down the computer and gather his school books. The Tuesday routine we'd maintained for 3 years was about to begin for the last time. I moved to the bottom of the staircase, hand resting on the worn wooden banister. My grandfather had built these stairs in 1952, back when families stayed together through hardship. Back when children could trust their parents to protect them rather than abandon them. "Grandpa, I'll be down in 5 minutes." Micah's voice carried the casual warmth of a child who believed his world was secure. A child who had no reason to doubt that Tuesday evening would unfold like every other Tuesday evening for the past 3 years. "Take your time, son." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The sounds of homework preparation began upstairs. Backpack zippers, textbook pages, the rustle of papers being organized. Micah was a good student, methodical and responsible in ways that made me proud. He'd inherited his mother's intelligence but somehow avoided her impulsiveness. At least I hoped he had. Standing at the base of the stairs, I realized how much I'd taken for granted. The simple pleasure of a grandson doing homework while dinner cooked on the stove. The comfortable routine of helping with algebra problems and listening to stories about school friends. The assumption that tomorrow would bring another normal evening in a life, built on stability and trust. All of it was about to change. The wall clock showed 5:55. Time was a river flowing toward a waterfall, carrying us both toward amement that couldn't be avoided or delayed. In my pocket, my phone remained silent. No missed calls from Vera, no text messages explaining herself. No last-minute change of heart. She was gone. Really, truly gone. And Micah needed to know. I cleared my throat and called up the stairs, my voice carrying more weight than usual. "Micah, can you come down here for a minute? We need to talk." A pause in the paper shuffling. "Sure, Grandpa. Just let me finish saving my homework file." The familiar sounds of a computer being shut down properly. Micah was careful with technology, never losing work to careless mistakes. Another trait that made him different from his mother, who had always been impulsive and careless with important things. Footsteps crossed the floor above my head, moving toward the top of the stairs. In 30 seconds, maybe less, my grandson would appear at the top of those steps with his usual smile and casual question about dinner plans, and I would have to find the words to tell him that his mother had chosen a criminal over her own son's welfare, that the woman who was supposed to love him most in the world had abandoned him for money, and a fresh start with a man who saw children as obstacles to overcome. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I saw the toe of his sneaker on the first step, then another step down. My heart hammered against my ribs as I prepared to destroy the innocence of the boy I'd helped raise for 15 years. Here we go. Time for the truth. Micah appeared at the bottom of the stairs with his usual easy stride, but something in his expression stopped. My rehearsed words before they could form. No confusion. No casual curiosity about why his grandfather looked so serious, just calm, knowing eyes that held far too much understanding for a 15-year-old. He settled beside me on the couch without being asked, positioning himself close enough for comfort, but not so close as to crowd, the gesture of someone preparing for a difficult conversation, rather than someone walking into one blindly. I reached for his hand, preparing to deliver the gentle blow I'd practiced. "Son, I need to tell you something important about your mother." "Grandpa, I already know." His voice carried no surprise, no shock, Just quiet resignation mixed with something that looked suspiciously like protective determination. She took all the money and left with Titus, right? The words hit me like cold water. My mouth opened, then closed. When did you find out? I heard them planning it Monday night. Micah shifted to face me directly, his young face serious beyond his ears. I was getting a glass of water around midnight when I heard voices in Mom's room. The door was cracked open and they were talking about bank accounts and getting away clean. My mind reeled backward. 24 hours Monday night. While I'd been sleeping peacefully in my bed, trusting that my family was safe under my roof, my daughter had been plotting my destruction just down the hallway. You've known since Monday. The timeline made my head spin, but you went to school yesterday morning like nothing was wrong. You did homework, ate dinner with me. I couldn't tell you then. Ika's voice gained strength, the tone of someone who'd thought through their reasoning carefully. I needed time to figure out how to fix it first, and I wanted you to have one more normal day before everything changed. He stood up suddenly and walked to his backpack by the front door. My grandson had been carrying this burden alone for 36 hours, protecting me from heartbreak, while I worried about protecting him from the same truth. But don't worry, Grandpa. Micah returned with a manila folder and several sheets of paper. I already handled it. Handled what exactly? He spread the papers on the coffee table between us with the methodical organization of someone presenting evidence. The first sheet was a printed photograph, grainy black and white from what looked like a school computer printer. A mugshot of Titus with wanted printed in bold letters across the top. Titus robbed Murphy's Corner Store last Tuesday, April 1st. Micah pointed to the date on the wanted poster. I found this on the Columbus Police Department website. He's wanted for armed robbery and there's a reward. I stared at the familiar face looking back from the paper. The same man who'd sat at my kitchen table asking questions about my pension and my security system. The same man my daughter had chosen over her family's safety. Where did you get this? Printed it during lunch at school yesterday. Mrs. Henderson lets us use the computer lab for research projects. Micah flipped to the next page. Handwritten notes in his careful teenager script. After I heard their plan Monday night, I couldn't sleep, so I researched everything I could find about Titus Morrison. The notes were thorough and organized. Dates of previous arrests, details from news articles about the Murphys' robbery, cross-references between different criminal cases. My 15-year-old grandson had conducted a more thorough background investigation than I'd ever attempted, and I know exactly where they went. Micah pointed to an address written at the bottom of his notes, 2847 Lane Avenue, Columbus, near OSU. I heard Mom mention it when they thought I was asleep. How do you remember the address so precisely? I wrote it down as soon as I heard it. Then I looked it up on Google Street View to make sure it was real. He reached into the folder and produced a printed map with the address circled in red ink. It's a crappy apartment complex about 2 miles from the university. The level of detail was staggering. Maps, criminal records, timeline analysis, even photographs of the apartment building he'd found online. Micah had approached this crisis with the systematic thoroughness of a detective, all while maintaining the facade of a normal teenager going about his daily routine. Son, this is incredible work, but why didn't you tell me any of this yesterday? We could have stopped them before they took the money. Micah's expression grew more serious. Because I knew you'd try to talk Mom out of leaving. You always try to fix things with her, even when she doesn't want them fixed, and if she'd stayed, she would have just found another way to take advantage of you later. The truth of that observation stung more than I wanted to admit. He was right. If I'd known about their plan in advance, I would have confronted Vera, tried to reason with her, probably offered her some of the money voluntarily just to keep the family together. But I did something better than stopping them. Micah's voice carried a note of pride that made him sound older than his years. I called the police tip hotline this morning before school, told them exactly where to find a wanted fugitive, gave them the address, described their car, everything. He handed me the final piece of paper, a confirmation number written in his handwriting along with the time of the call. 9:45 a.m., Tuesday, April 8th, anonymous tip regarding Titus Morrison wanted for armed robbery. I sat back against the couch cushions, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what my grandson had accomplished. While I'd been stumbling through my day in shock and confusion, he'd been executing a plan that could bring both justice and recovery to our family crisis. Micah, you're braver and smarter than anyone your age should have to be. I learned from watching you, Grandpa. His voice carried no boasting, just simple truth. You taught me that when someone threatens your family, you protect them. That's all I was doing, but he'd protected me better than I'd ever managed to protect him. While I had nibbled his mother's selfish choices for years, my 15-year-old grandson had seen the situation clearly and acted with decisive intelligence. Why didn't you tell me earlier today, though, when I came home from the bank so upset? Micah's expression grew gentler. I could see you were hurting enough already, and I wasn't sure the police would act quickly. I didn't want to get your hopes up if nothing came of the tip. He'd been shielding me from disappointment even as he worked to solve the crisis. I couldn't handle myself. The role reversal was complete. My grandson had become the protector, and I had become the one who needed protection. The sound of my phone ringing cut through the moment, sharp and unexpected in the quiet room. I glanced at the phone, then back at Micah's expectant face. We should probably answer that, not yet. Micah's hand touched my arm gently. Let me explain the rest first. I set the phone aside, letting it ring through to voicemail. My grandson had earned the right to finish his story without interruption. You asked why I didn't tell you earlier. Micah organized his papers into a neat stack, buying time to find the right words. The truth is, I've been watching Mom take advantage of you for years, and I was tired of seeing you get hurt. He leaned back against the couch, suddenly looking very young despite his mature actions. Remember last Christmas when she promised to help pay for groceries, but then spent her whole paycheck on that purse and you just smiled and said it was fine. We'd make do. I remembered. Vera had been so excited about the designer bag she'd found on sale, justifying the expense by claiming she needed something professional for job interviews that never materialized for jobs she never seriously pursued. Or when she borrowed $300 for Micah's school clothes. But then I saw her wearing new boots that cost twice that much. Micah's voice carried the patient tone of someone who'd been making careful observations for a long time. You never asked for the money back, never made her explain where her priorities were. The pattern he described was accurate and painful. Every time Vera had asked for help, I'd provided it without question, without accountability, without any expectation that she contribute to the household that supported her. I love Mom, Grandpa, but I love you more. The simple declaration hit me harder than any of his careful research or strategic planning. You're the one who makes sure I eat breakfast every day. You're the one who helps with my homework and comes to my chess tournaments and remembers when I have tests. He was right. While Vera lived in our house, I'd been Theon providing the daily care, emotional support, and practical guidance that Micah needed. His mother had been more like an additional dependent than a partner in raising him. When I heard them planning to steal your money, I realized this was my chance to protect you for once instead of always being the one getting protected. Micah's voice grew stronger, more confident. You've spent 15 years taking care of me. It was time for me to take care of you. The role reversal still felt disorienting, but I couldn't deny the competence he'd demonstrated. While I'd been paralyzed by shock and betrayal, my grandson had researched the situation, identified solutions, and taken decisive action. I couldn't let them hurt you anymore. Micah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You're all I have that really matters. I reached over and pulled him into a fierce hug. This boy who'd become more adult than his adult mother, his arms wrapped around me with surprising strength. And for a moment, we were just grandfather and grandson holding on to each other in the wreckage of our broken family. We're going to be fine, you know, I said against the top of his head. Just you and me. We make a pretty good team. Better than we ever were with Mom around. His voice was muffled against my shoulder, but I could hear the relief in it. I was always worried she'd do something like this eventually. At least now we know where we stand. When we separated, both of us had tears in our eyes, but they felt more like tears of relief than sorrow. The crisis had stripped away illusions, but it had also revealed the strength of what remained. So what happens next? Micah asked, settling back beside me on the couch. If the police arrest them, do we get the money back? I don't know the legal process, I admitted. But even if we don't recover a penny, we'll figure out how to manage. I've got my pension and you've got a good head on your shoulders. Between the two of us, we can handle whatever comes next. Micah nodded, but I could see the practical concern in his eyes. 15-year-olds shouldn't have to worry about household finances. But this particular 15-year-old had earned the right to honest conversations about our situation. Are we going to have enough money? He asked quietly. For groceries and utilities and everything. The question was practical and immediate. The kind of concern that kept teenagers awake at night when they shouldn't have to think about such things. But it also revealed how much he understood about our new reality. I started to answer, then stopped as a memory surfaced. Something I'd forgotten in all the crisis and revelation of the past few hours. Something that could ease at least some of his worry about our immediate future. You know what, Micah? I stood up from the couch, energy returning to my tired body. I just remembered something upstairs. His curious eyes followed my movement. What kind of something, Grandpa? I smiled for the first time since discovering the empty bank account. The kind of something your mother never knew existed. Wait here a minute, I told Micah as I headed for the stairs. I need to check on something in my bedroom. Should I come with you? He started to rise from the couch. Actually, yes, you should see this. Climbing the stairs felt different now, lighter somehow despite the long day of emotional weight. Micah followed close behind, his curiosity evident in the way he took the steps two at a time to keep pace with my sudden urgency. My bedroom occupied the back corner of the second floor, modestly furnished with the kind of practical pieces that had served me well for 23 years in this house. The double bed with its worn oak frame, the dresser topped with family photographs and everyday necessities, the nightstand that held my reading glasses, and the small digital clock that woke me at 6 a.m. every morning. What are we looking for? Micah asked as I knelt beside the bed. In policy. I reached under the bed frame, feeling for the metal storage box I'd placed there 2 years ago. Not the kind you buy from a company, the kind you create yourself. The box slid out easily, heavier than its size suggested. Plain gray metal with a simple latch. The kind of fireproof storage container sold at office supply stores for protecting important documents. I'd bought it specifically for this purpose, though I'd hoped never to need what it contained. I carried the box to the bed and set it down on the faded blue comforter. Micah watched with growing anticipation as I reached behind the frame photo of his grandmother on my nightstand and retrieved a small key. Your mother walked past this room every day for 3 years, I explained, inserting the key into the box's lock. She never once asked what was in here or why I kept it locked. The lid opened to reveal neat stacks of bills, mostly 20s and 50s with a few hundreds mixed in. Money organized by denomination and held together with rubber bands, the result of 2 years of careful small cal saving. Micah's eyes widened. How much is in there? Let's count and see. He lifted out the first stack and began separating the bills. $20 bills, 40, 60, 80, 100. The familiar ritual of counting money felt different when it represented security rather than loss. Stack by stack, we organized the cash on the bed. Some bills were crisp and new, others worn from circulation, but all of them represented small monthly deposits I'd made for my pension without Vera's knowledge. 1 220s, I announced, moving to the next stack. 8 50s and 1 200 in hundreds. I counted the final stack twice to be sure. Total $3,200. Micah stared at the money spread across the bed as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. You've been hiding this the whole time. Not hiding, protecting. I began reorganizing the bills back into their original stacks. My grandfather lived through the Great Depression. He taught me never to keep all your eggs in one basket. Always have something set aside that nobody else knows about. The old man's wisdom had seemed outdated in the modern world of banks and direct deposits, but it had just proven itself invaluable. While Vera had cleaned out every account she knew about, she'd never discovered the emergency fund that would keep us afloat. Why didn't Mom know about it? Because somewhere in my gut I knew this day might come. The admission felt painful but necessary. I love your mother, but I've watched her make selfish choices for years. Some part of me recognized that her access to my resources needed limits. Micah helped me return the money to the storage box, his movements careful and respectful. So we're actually okay. Like really okay? For several months at least. I locked the box and returned the key to its hiding place long enough to figure out our next steps, make some decisions about the future, maybe even recover some of what was stolen if the police are successful. The relief on my grandson's face was worth more than all the money in the box. For the first time since this morning, he looked like a 15-year-old again instead of a teenager forced to carry adult burdens. Can we go back downstairs now? Micah asked. I want to finish setting up the chess game we never got to play. Chess, the normal evening activity we'd maintained for 3 years. The comfortable routine that represented stability and connection. The idea sounded perfect after a day of crisis and revelation. Absolutely. I lifted the storage box. Let me put this back where it belongs, and then we'll see if you've improved your endgame strategy since last week. Walking down the stairs together, money box in hand, felt like descending from crisis into recovery. The house still contained the same furniture, the same photographs, the same memories of family life that had included Vera. But now it felt like a home for two instead of three. And somehow that felt more honest than what we'd had before. In the living room, Micah was already pulling the wooden chest set from its cabinet, arranging pieces on the coffee table with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. The familiar ritual of setting up pawns and positioning major pieces provided exactly the kind of normal activity we both needed. I placed the storage box on the mantelpiece next to the family photographs, a tangible reminder that security and planning could coexist with love and generosity. Then I settled into my usual chair across from Micah's position on the couch. "Your move, Grandpa." But before I could touch a piece, the phone rang again, its sharp tone cutting through our moment of peaceful normally. The chest pieces sat abandoned between us as I stared at the ringing telephone. 8:30 in the evening was late for casual calls in our quiet neighborhood. The mechanical ring of the old rotary phone seemed louder than usual, more insistent, cutting through the comfortable silence we'd finally achieved. Micah looked up from the chessboard, his eyes meeting mine with shared understanding. We both knew who was calling. I rose slowly from my chair and walked to the side table where the black phone demanded attention. The receiver felt heavy in my hand as I lifted it to my ear, preparing for the storm I knew was coming. "Hello, Dad. How could you betray me like this?" Vera's voice exploded through the earpiece so loudly that Micah could hear every word from across the room. "Titus is arrested. The police took everything." "How could you do this to me?" I held the phone slightly away from my ear, gesturing for Micah to stay quiet and still. My grandson needed to hear this conversation, needed to understand the consequences of his brave action. But he also needed protection from his mother's rage. "Where are you, Vera?" "Are you safe?" "Safe. I'm broke and alone because of you." Her voice cracked with fury and desperation. "The police knew exactly where to find us. They had our address, knew about the money, everything. You called them, didn't you?" "Don't lie to me." The moment had arrived. I could expose Micah's involvement, shift the blame to a 15-year-old boy who'd acted out of love and protection, or I could shield my grandson from his mother's wrath by accepting responsibility for doing what needed to be done. Yes. The word came out steady and clear. "I called them." Silence stretched across the line for several seconds. Then Vera's voice returned lower but somehow more dangerous. "I can't believe you would turn your own daughter into the police. You stole my life savings and ran away with a criminal." I kept my voice calm, factual. "That money was all I had, Vera. You took everything I'd worked 42 years to save. It was just sitting there in those accounts. You weren't using it. It was my retirement fund, my security, my backup plan for medical emergencies and unexpected expenses." Each word felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of our relationship. "You had no right to take it. I'm your daughter. I deserve better than living in that tiny town, working dead-end jobs, never getting anywhere." The self-pity in her voice was as familiar as it was infuriating. Titus could have given me a real life. We could have started over somewhere new with stolen money and a man wanted for armed robbery. He was trying to change. People can change, Dad. I looked across the room at Micah, who was listening to every word with the focused attention of someone learning hard lessons about family loyalty and personal responsibility. My grandson had risked everything to protect me from this woman's selfishness, and now she was demanding sympathy for the consequences of her own choices. The money is gone. Vera confiscated it as evidence. Titus is in jail, and you're exactly where your choices have led you. This is all your fault, her voice rose to a shriek. I'm homeless and penniless because you couldn't just let me be happy. I couldn't let you destroy our family. The words came from deep in my chest, from a place of pain I'd been carrying for months. You abandoned your son, stole from your father, and ran away with a criminal. Those were your choices, not mine. Through the phone, I could hear traffic noise in the background. Vera was calling from a payphone or someone else's cell somewhere public, probably with nowhere to go and no money for basic necessities. The reality of her situation was finally catching up with her, but she was still blaming everyone except herself. You've ruined everything, she screamed. This was my chance at real happiness and you destroyed it. I held the phone away from my ear as her voice reached a painful volume. Micah had moved closer, standing just behind my chair, offering silent support. My grandson's presence gave me strength to say what needed to be said. I protected my family, I said quietly. From you. The line went silent except for the sound of Vera's ragged breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was cold and deadly calm. "This isn't over." "What do you mean this isn't over?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "I mean, you haven't heard the last from me." Vera's voice had shifted from screaming rage to something more controlled and calculating. "I'm stranded here because of what you did. I need money to get back on my feet. The money you stole is gone, confiscated by police. I can't help you with that. You have other money, your pension, your savings account that I couldn't access. Send me something, anything. I'm your daughter." The plea carried the familiar tone of manipulation she'd perfected over the years. The same voice that had convinced me to pay her rent, her lawyer fees, her credit card bills. The voice that had trained me to say yes without question, to enable without accountability. But not tonight. Not after everything that had happened. No. The single word hung in the air between us like a door slamming shut. "What do you mean, no?" Disbelief crept into her voice. "I'm homeless. I have nowhere to go. No way to buy food or find shelter. Then you should have thought about that before you stole from your family and ran away with a criminal." I surprised myself with how steady my voice remained. "Those are the consequences of your choices, Vera. You can't just abandon me. I'm your child and Micah is your child." I looked at my grandson, who was watching me with pride and amazement. "The child you abandoned without a second thought. The boy you were willing to drag into a life of crime and uncertainty because you want a fresh start with a man who beats people unconscious in bar fights. Silence, then, that's different. Micah is 15, he can take care of himself. He's a child who needs stability, security, and adults who put his welfare above their own selfish desires." The words came from months of suppressed frustration and disappointment. "Everything you've proven you can't provide. I could have provided plenty if you hadn't interfered. Titus had plans. Titus is a career criminal who robbed a convenience store a week before you stole my money. His plans involved using stolen funds to finance a life built on more crime." He felt Micah's hand touch my shoulder, a gesture of support that gave me courage to continue. "I won't enable that kind of life for you or anyone else." "Fine, then I'll figure it out myself. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you change your mind. I hope you do figure it out, Vera. I hope you find a way to build a legitimate life, make amends for what you've done, and maybe someday earn back the trust you've destroyed." My voice caught slightly on the words. "But I won't send you money to make bad choices easier. You're choosing money over your daughter. I'm choosing my grandson's welfare over your immediate wants. I'm choosing responsibility over enablement. I'm choosing to break a pattern that has hurt all of us, including you." The breathing on the other end of the line became more labored. Vera was crying now, but the tears sounded angry rather than remorseful. "If that's how you want it, then fine. Don't expect to ever see me again. Don't expect phone calls or letters or visits. Don't expect to meet any grandchildren I might have in the future. You've made your choice and I'm making mine." The ultimatum was designed to wound to make me reconsider my position out of fear of permanent loss. But sitting in my living room with Micah beside me, surrounded by evidence of the stable, peaceful life we'd begun building together, the threat felt more like a promise than a punishment. "If that's what you decide, Vera, I'll be sad, but I'll understand. The door will always be open if you want to return under different circumstances. If you're ready to be accountable, to make amends, to contribute instead of just taking." "You mean if I'm ready to crawl back on my hands and knees and beg forgiveness for trying to build a better life? I mean, if you're ready to acknowledge that stealing from your family and abandoning your son were wrong choices that hurt people who loved you? If you're ready to earn trust instead of demanding it? Well, I'm not ready for that and I never will be." Her voice had gone cold and final. The daughter I'd raised, taught to ride a bicycle, walked down the aisle unrescued from an abusive marriage, was about to cut herself out of our lives permanently, rather than accept responsibility for her actions. "I love you, Vera. I always will. But I won't enable your destructive choices anymore. Save it for someone who cares." The phone line went dead with the harsh sound of a receiver being slammed down. I stood holding the silent phone for a long moment, processing the finality of what had just happened. 38 years of being Vera's father had just ended with a dial tone. Micah's arms wrapped around me from behind, a 15-year-old boy, offering comfort to his grandfather in the aftermath of losing a daughter. I set the phone back in its cradle and turned to embrace him properly. Both of us understanding that our family configuration had just become permanent. We held each other in the quiet living room, surrounded by chest pieces and family photographs, and the accumulated comfort of a home that had weathered its worst storm and emerged stronger than before. 2 months passed like pages turning in a book of ordinary days. Spring gave way to early summer, and the crisis of April faded into a distant memory that rarely intruded on our settled routine. Micah finished his sophomore year with grades that would have made any parent proud. His best semester since middle school, accomplished without the constant stress of his mother's financial demands and emotional chaos. I discovered the pleasure of full-time grandfathering, cooking breakfast every morning, helping with homework every evening, attending school events without worrying about whether Vera would show up and cause some kind of scene. We developed our own rhythm: grocery shopping on Tuesdays, chess lessons on Thursday evenings, weekend projects around the house that Micah approached with the enthusiasm of someone finally secure in his living situation. The $3,000 I'd hidden proved sufficient for our careful lifestyle. My pension covered basic expenses, and Micah contributed by taking on a summer job mowing lawns in the neighborhood. He'd grown taller in those 2 months, more confident, carrying himself like a young man who understood his place in the world and the value of his contributions. We rarely spoke of Vera. Her absence became as natural as her presence had once been disruptive. The house felt larger without her constant crisis, more peaceful without the underlying tension of wondering when the next emergency would drain our resources or emotional reserves. On Thursday afternoon, June 6th, I was reading the Riverside Herald in my usual chair while Micah worked on his summer reading assignment at the kitchen table. The windows were open to let in the warm air and the sound of birds in the maple tree outside. Our domestic tranquility had become so routine that I'd almost forgotten how precious it was. The loud knocking on the front door shattered the peaceful atmosphere like a rock through glass. Both Micah and I looked up in surprise. We rarely had unexpected visitors, and most of our neighbors knew to call ahead. The knocking came again, more insistent, as if whoever stood on our porch was determined not to be ignored. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 4 hours in the afternoon. Too early for dinner visitors, too late for morning deliveries. Who could that be? I asked, more to myself than to Micah. Maybe it's the mailman, Micah suggested, though we both knew the mail had already been delivered. I rose from my chair and walked to the front window, angling myself to see the porch without being observed. What I saw made me freeze in place, my hand gripping the curtain edge. Vera stood on our front step, thinner than she'd been in April, wearing clothes that looked like they'd seen better days. A single small duffel bag sat at her feet, everything she owned apparently contained in one compact package. My daughter had returned. "Grandpa." Micah appeared beside me, concerned in his voice. "What is it?" I stepped back from the window, my mind racing through possibilities and complications. 2 months of peace, 2 months of stability, 2 months of building a life that worked for both of us. And now this. The knocking came again, followed by a voice I recognized but wished I didn't have to hear. "Dad, I know you're in there. Please open the door." Micah's eyes widened as he recognized his mother's voice. His body shifted slightly, moving closer to me in an unconscious gesture of alliance and protection. We'd become a team over these past 2 months, and his instincts told him to stand with me, rather than rush to greet the woman who'd abandoned him. I walked slowly to the front door, my hand resting on the deadbolt I'd installed the week after her phone call. Such a small thing, but it represented the boundary I'd finally learned to establish, the choice to let people into our life rather than simply allowing them to take what they wanted. My fingers hesitated at it on the lock. 2 months ago, I would have opened this door immediately, would have welcomed her back with relief and questions and probably money for whatever crisis had driven her home. But that man had been trained by decades of enabling and fear of loss. The man standing at this door had learned something different. He'd learned that love sometimes required saying no, that protecting the people who mattered most might mean disappointing the people who demanded the most. That family could be redefined by choice and commitment rather than biology and obligation. I turned the deadbolt and opened the door. Vera stood before me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. She looked older, worn down by whatever experiences had filled her 2 months away from home, but her eyes still held the same mixture of defiance and entitlement that had driven her to steal my life savings and abandon her son. "Hello, Dad." Behind me, I felt rather than saw Micah move closer, ready to support whatever decision I made about the woman who'd given birth to him, but failed to be his mother when it mattered most. "Hello, Vera." She glanced past me to acknowledge her son, the boy she'd left behind without a second thought when her dreams of easy money and criminal romance called to her. "Hi, Micah." My grandson said nothing, but I felt his presence like an anchor. reminding me of what we'd built together and what we stood to lose if he made the same mistakes that had brought us to crisis in the first place. Vera looked at both of us, waiting for an invitation that didn't come automatically this time. The door remained half closed, my body blocking easy entry. My choice still unmade about whether our hard-won peace was worth risking for the possibility of redemption. Can I come in? If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.